Welcome to the weekend. It is Saturday. You've been listening to a lot of news out on this radio station today. You've been listening to a lot of other stuff. Now it's time to start talking about health and fitness a little bit. So I hope you're enjoying your weekend, getting out there a little bit, maybe doing some hiking, maybe some grilling, and all that stuff. So this is my show. I'm Coach Chris. This is the Cerebral Edge, and where we make you 1% better every day. Right? And remember, we make you 1% better. So that way at the end of the year, you are 365% better instead of just 100% better. Right? And I am in the fitness field, of course, and I have a lot of friends in the fitness field. And I have one on today. I could say friend, even possibly mentor, Pat Marques from NeuroAthlete. Thanks for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me, Chris. This is awesome.
That's great. So at NeuroAthlete, Pat is a exercise therapist and works with a good friend of ours named Dr. Higgins. And go ahead and explain a little bit about what you do, how it's different, and how it involves the brain.
Yeah, so NeuroAthlete Clinic is our place, and we're up in Monument. And Dr. Grove Higgins, actually a mutual friend of Chris and I, he actually started a nonprofit here in town many years ago when all the wars were still going on for the wounded, ill, and injured soldiers off of Fort Carson. And that's where Chris and I actually met, it was 11 years ago, right?
Long time.
Yeah. And
a lot less grays back then, right?
A lot less, yes. and Dr. Higgins is a doctor of chiropractic, but he's got a massive background in strength and conditioning and neuro rehab, gait mechanics and things like that. And so he developed a program for the wounded, ill, and injured soldiers to help get them out of pain. So most of these guys and gals were on their way out of the Army. And so it was about helping them transition, to the civilian world, but helping them, our role was to help get them out of pain, as you experienced both as a, participant and as a trainer there.
Absolutely. It definitely got me out of pain in ways I never thought that would make a difference of getting out of pain.
Right.
Right.
And so it's that neurological approach, right? Looking at any client as through the lens of your nervous system. So because your nervous system is a governing system of your body, it runs everything. How you move, how you breathe, how you digest food, how your hormones get dumped, and everything else it all comes from the brain. So that's where we focus on when we're looking at folks who are coming to us for pain issues, or they're coming to us for some other kind of movement dysfunction, or if they just want to even improve sport and fitness performance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a missing key that a lot of people don't realize. And that's why I'm glad you're on, because you explain it so much better than I do when I talk about, neurological performance relating to physical performance, right?
Yeah.
Because sometimes I'll tell people like, oh, you just deal with pain stuff. I'm like, no, you don't understand.
Yeah.
If your brain's putting on brakes, even your sports performance is going to be inhibited.
Yes. And a lot of times the way I'll explain it is that anything you're doing from a fitness or sport standpoint, right, is since it's all regulated by the brain, if the brain's not happy about something, it's going to put the brakes on you, predominantly in one of three ways. It's either going to make you stiffer, or it's going to make you weaker, or it's going to give you pain. Mm-hmm. So when you're stiff, and you've probably had a lot of clients who are like, oh, I've got tight hamstrings. Yep. I've always had tight hamstrings. My whole family has tight hamstrings, right? Like it's a genetic issue. But whenever we have a tight anything, hamstrings, chest, upper back, low back, whatever, that is the brain innervating those muscles to be tight because they can't do it on their own. They don't have a brain.
We want to be tight.
Right. Yeah. Like we like this. Yeah. They can't do that. The brain has to innervate them to be tight. Now it's happening subconsciously. Obviously, we can't. Because it's a mechanism to protect you from something. So the brain is not happy about something, so it's making you tight. We often find that that the joints are immobile, and that's really why muscles get tight. Mm-hmm. But if we had you under anesthesia, we put you in full splits, or bend you right in half.
That hurts just thinking about it.
Right. Yeah. But you can do that because everything's totally relaxed when you're under anesthesia, right? Because the brain is turned off in a sense. And so that's the one way that the brain's going to put the brakes on you. Secondly, it's going to make you weak. And not necessarily that the muscle is actually weak, but that the brain is acting like a governor in a car engine and only letting you go to 55. So,
Right.
Only letting that muscle activate so much. It's really more of an activation issue. And so the brain, again, being protective, another way to be protective is to not give you all the force production capability that you actually have. And you probably muscle test clients all the time,
Yep.
right? And so you'll find one side's weaker than the other. And, a lot of times, we'll have clients who've come from physical therapy and stuff like that, and they're like, yeah, they told me my left glute was weak, and I had to strengthen my left glute, but, well, why is it weak? Because it's pretty rare that side to side were truly significant, unless we were obviously in a cast for several months or something. Then we would actually have muscle atrophy and strength atrophy. But when that's not the case, then it's the brain not firing correctly, right? And so it's worried about something, and so it's putting the brakes on you through making you appear to be weaker by not driving things. And then pain also, 100% a brain signal, 100%, right? It didn't feel that way, obviously. You have pain in your knee or your hip or your shoulder. You feel the pain there, but that is the brain sending a signal of pain to that area. And not the other way around. 21st century brain science and pain science, and we don't have pain receptors.
Right.
So, if I were to, start slowly pushing a needle into your bicep, right, you'd start feeling it first to be uncomfortable, and then as we pierce the skin, it gets really uncomfortable, right?
Right.
But the receptors that are sensing that threat are literally that, threat receptors. So they are going, hey, this is not looking good. This is looking dangerous, right? I don't like this. It's sending more and more signal as I push farther and farther. And then eventually your brain's going to send pain so that you look down and knock my hand away, and so you do something about it.
Right.
This is what this is how we learn not to touch a hot stove and things like that, right? So pain is 100% an action signal from the brain to keep us safe and to signal us when something is wrong. Of course, we have acute pain. We, tear a ligament, or something does pierce our skin, right? If I put a railroad spike in your thigh, we know why there's pain, right? There's no mystery there.
Man, what a jerk.
Right. Although I'd have to hammer it pretty hard. You got big thighs. But in acute senses, when there is actual physical damage, yeah, you're going there's going to be the pain. But also in chronic pain, right? Because tissue heals in weeks to months. So if you've had 2 years of knee pain or 2 years of low back pain, that would be chronic pain, or what's often called persistent pain now. And that means that there's been a threat there long enough that you have not addressed correctly, that now your nervous system's hypersensitized. And so a little bit of threat sends an inordinately big signal of pain from your brain to that area, right? And so that's what we try to help people with when they're coming to us for pain, is go, okay, what is that threat that's going on? Because it may or may not actually be tissue damage.
Right. Where's the neurological deficit? And interesting thing that you talked about with muscle testing, right?
Yeah.
And then a lot of my clients, they'd be like, well, I'm just weak there. I'm like, well, there's a reason behind that. And one of the more interesting things that you and I have both started to get behind was this diaphragmatic breathing.
Yeah.
And by breathing correctly affects your neurology, of course, right? Because we both know that the brain survives off of oxygen as one of its primary fuel sources.
Yep.
And the more oxygen nutrients you bring in, all of a sudden your body starts functioning better. So by doing some diaphragmatic breathing, I've had clients get automatically stronger from that, right? Because they'll come in, they'll be like, oh, well, I worked legs, so, it's just, weak now. And it's like, well, no, there's something underlying under there, because your muscle's in its strongest position right now, and it should be able to resist this. Yeah. And when they don't, and then we start working out a little bit of breathing, all of a sudden it kicks on. You want to explain a little bit about that?
Yeah. Breathing's probably one of my favorite topics as far as, health and fitness and things like that. And the reality is, and this is, it's not anybody's fault, but 99% of the people I see don't breathe correctly. And it's a modern lifestyle thing for a lot of reasons. Yeah, there's the slumped over to desk and computer, things like that. But when we're talking about diaphragmatic breathing, right, that diaphragm is a big, round, parachute-shaped muscle separating the chest cavity from the abdominal cavity. And it's dome-shaped or parachute-shaped. And if it's acting correctly, when we inhale, then that muscle flexes and contracts, and then it goes flat like a pizza. Mm-hmm. So you should be, kind of breathing into your abdomen more and not into your chest, but that's not how most people breathe.
Right. What you see a lot of is, and some of it's also cosmetic. People are like, well, I don't want to look fat.
It's very much that way.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, we all do it. We go to the beach, I make that joke all the time. Go to the beach. What do? You suck it in.
Suck it, bring it in.
Yeah, hold it in, right? And so we aesthetically, don't want to think about breathing down there, but it's hugely important and makes a big difference with how well you move, how well you act cognitively, like how well your brain works because of oxygenation to the brain, and obviously with aerobic exercise and things like that, but also how well you digest food. It affects everything.
Absolutely. Well, we're talking about food a lot, so I'm getting a little hungry, so we're going to go on a little quick break here on the Cerebral Edge, and we will be right back with more awesome tips from Pat on breathing, neurology, and pain. This is Power Talk 1040. We are back on the Cerebral Edge with Coach Chris. I'm Coach Chris. You're listening to Power Talk 1040. We're talking today with my man Pat Marques from NeuroAthlete, talking about breathing in some of that oxygen, some of that nice air out there, that mountain air, making you perform a little bit better, and overall performance, and how your brain can stop your performance if you're not getting enough of it in your system. So thanks for coming on, Pat. I really appreciate it. And let's talk a little bit about how the diaphragm, if that gets stuck, how it can affect muscles upstream and downstream.
Yeah, it's really interesting on the diaphragm and how it's constructed. So one thing a lot of people don't realize with breathing, right, is that your lungs are basically bags that can't move themselves, right? So the only way they get bigger and draw air in is changing the volume of that chest cavity, right? Mm-hmm. So when your brain goes, wow, I need a breath, send the signal to inhale. It's not sending a signal to the lungs, it's sending a signal to the muscles of respiration, right? Predominantly, or hopefully, right, should be to the diaphragm specifically, right, at rest, right? And so when that diaphragm contracts, like we talked about, it's a dome-shaped muscle. So when it contracts, it contracts inward and kind of flattens out. And so, the stomach should move out slightly. The ribs should flare out to the side slightly and back. Not a lot to the back because, of course, we got a spine, right? And so it's not going to move too far. But it should be more like, we talk about belly breathing. We like to describe it as really 360 abdominal breathing. So when that happens, the other part of the diaphragm, the tendons that connect the muscle to the bone, so the tendons from the diaphragm actually go down the front side of the lumbar spine or the lower back. So it makes a big effect then on the rest of the spine and the spinal musculature in that, because it's the natural gentle pull on the lumbar spine that should be happening every breath. And so you probably talked about, or seen with muscle testing with folks and then doing some diaphragmatic breathing and they get stronger. So a couple reasons for that are that if you're not a diaphragmatic breather, and then you go through some good diaphragm, or you're coached through some good diaphragmatic breaths, not only have you better oxygenated your system and kind of rebalanced your carbon dioxide to oxygen ratios, right? You've activated areas in the brain that are responsible for breathing in a better way than they normally do. And in that, we don't have to get depth into neuroanatomy, but really it's in the brainstem area,
right,
where that happens. And the brainstem controls a lot of your unconscious posture and stability. And so now you've activated that. So now your posture and stability is better. And so you can produce more strength, right? And better force output.
So that brings me to my years as a power lifter when I competed. And one of the people I look up to and listen to is Dave Tate. And I remember him saying, hey, if your chest is rising when you're breathing in before you bring the bar up, you're breathing wrong. He said, so do this. He goes, shut your mouth, breathe in your nose, fill your belly, make yourself fat, tense around it, then pick up the bar. And let me tell you, that felt about 50% lighter once I started doing that versus just trying to inhale, because you see a lot of Olympic lifters that inhale in their mouth, their shoulders will rise and all that stuff. And they don't realize they're getting weaker by doing that.
Yeah.
And so there's this huge history behind nasal breathing, longevity, and health, right? And also strength. Yeah. So can you shed some light on that?
Yeah, nasal breathing is super important. I mean, that's how we're supposed to breathe. And when we're very little, as small kids, up to about 5 years old or so, that's generally how we breathe, right? In through the nose and diaphragmatic breaths, right? You got babies, and if you watch them, right, that's kind of how when they're sleeping, that's how they're breathing.
Zero stress at that point.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Then life hits you. But then some of the studies have shown that where we see kids start to transfer to become mouth breathers and chest breathers instead of nose breathers and diaphragmatic breathers is about 5.5 years old. So now they're starting to watch their parents.
That early, huh?
Right.
5.5.
Yeah.
Wow.
So they're unconsciously becoming more socially conscious, and they're interacting more with speech and things like that. But then they're also watching parents who breathe a certain way, and they mimic a lot of the things we do that we don't have any realization of, right? And so that the nasal breathing is important for several reasons. One, it's how we're supposed to breathe, right? the nose is the nose, right? So the nasal passages are made for breathing. The mouth isn't really made for it. It's kind of a backup system, right? Really for eating, right? Speaking. That's why we have sinus passages. So 4 big things happen when you breathe through your nose that do not happen when you breathe through your mouth.
4 things. All right, let's hear them.
Number 1 is the air gets filtered. That's what the sinuses are, right? A filtering system for contaminants in the air. Number 2, the air gets warmed as it comes in when we breathe through the nose. Thirdly, the air gets humidified. So when we are breathing through our mouth, we are breathing unfiltered, dry, right? Cold air.
Sucking all the germs out of the air with your mouth like a vacuum cleaner.
Exactly. Taking them right into the lungs, right?
Right there.
So, and those things become very important, right? And then also, the 4th thing is, if anyone's out there is familiar with nitric oxide, they make a lot of supplements, NO2 supplements, right? And what does it do? Better blood flow, vascular movement, right? So it's a vasodilator, meaning that the blood vessels can get a little bit larger. We carry natural nitric oxide in our sinuses. So if we breathe through our mouth, we don't get it. Yeah, so once you start doing nasal breathing and it becomes habitual and things like that, then you already have better vasodilation, better blood flow and things like that.
So you've run across them, I've run across them, right? People that breathe in their chest, they just cannot get that deep diaphragmatic breath. What's one tip out there that you can give the listeners right now that'll help them get that air down lower in their abdomen, that 360 expansion that they can do probably sitting in their car?
So if one way to focus on this, right? Initially, it can be hard for some folks, not everybody, but for some, to diaphragmatically breathe, right? And like you said, that brings the air into the lower lobes of the lungs. When we're a vertical breather or a chest breather, then the air's getting to the upper lobes, but not down to the lower lobes. Several good reasons, neurological reasons for that we can talk about in a second too. But one way to focus on it, right, is to focus on nasal inhales. It's usually actually easier at first to diaphragmatically breathe when we're breathing in through the nose, right? So you focus on inhaling through the nose with the mouth shut. And then you can, if you just have a hand on your belly button, right, you can breathe into that hand. Now, of course, you're not actually breathing in the hand. The air doesn't go to the abdomen.
Right.
But if you focus on that, it drives a diaphragmatic breath, meaning that diaphragm's going to go down and it pushes on your guts, which then pushes the hand out. So if you focus on that with a few breaths of breathing into that hand, you can start to get the feeling for that. If you're seated, like you're in a car, I mean, keep both hands on the wheel, everybody, right? So now, but if you're in a car and you're driving, right, you can kind of focus on that breathing. And if it's easier at first, exhale through the mouth, right? In for 2, and then I usually tell people to exhale for 4. Get a longer exhale, right? You should feel that abdomen come back in, right? Kind of come into a concave kind of movement. As you get better at it, you can feel yourself in that seated position as you inhale and you feel the belly kind of coming out gently, that you feel your low back actually press into the seat as well, right? So that helps you get kind of a 360 feeling for that. But getting people to be able to diaphragmatically breathe first is step one with all the breathing training I do. Because if you want to get into more advanced stuff and really improve your aerobic capacity and things like that, you need to be using that diaphragm.
Has to happen.
Right. Yeah. Has to happen.
All right. So I've been hearing some pretty interesting things from Pat here today. Talk about nitric oxide, ways to breathe, how it helps your performance. How do people get a hold of you?
So if you go to NeuroAthlete Chiro.com.
NeuroAthlete Chiro.com.
Chiro, yeah, CHIRO.com. You can find our website. Phone number is 719-225-4949. If you'd like to come in, consult, anything like that. But the website's probably the best to check us out and see everything we do and everything we have at the facility.
Awesome. Yeah. So you guys have some other treatments there as well.
Yes.
I know you guys have things like red light, which is really good, and that's been picking up in popularity lately.
Yes, it has.
So you guys have that going on. Can you explain just a little bit about that?
Well, yeah, red light therapy is actually been around for a lot of years. It's good 25 years of solid research on its benefits, which are many. It's a great recovery tool, right? So what the red light does, it's the red light spectrum of light, and then they also use near infrared. Most of the lights do, and it's basically healing at a cellular level. The red light does, and it's not very long, because after maybe 10 minutes of red light, you've maxed out on home. It doesn't hurt it to do anymore, but you've maxed out on what you can do. So it's fairly short way of getting some recovery in, and it's just for general cellular healing. It's actually great for your eyes as well, eyes and your skin, and for any injured areas.
Right. This is why I like having other friends come on and talk, because I learn so much more, man. After having a conversation for a few minutes with Pat, I'm like, man, I don't think I realized I knew as much as I thought I did. So it's awesome to have people like you on, involving a lot more with movement than just joints, ligaments, and tendons, actually diving into the neuroscience behind it, diving into the nervous system. That's why this is called the Cerebral Edge. Thank you all for listening here on 1040 KPPF Power Talk Radio. Stay strong.